In this exercise, we are going to write a program that takes as input any number of seconds and then displays the equivalent hours, minutes, and seconds. I've already created the form with the text box where the user will enter the time in seconds, then convert button which they will click, and the output label which will then show the hours, minutes and seconds that are equivalent to the seconds given by the user. So the instruction was to use methods to do the calculations and to display the output. So in the convert click event handler, we have to call those methods. So we're going to just first get the value, the seconds value from the text box. So I'm going to declare a variable called seconds, and then assign to that the integer version of the text box text property. Okay, so now we're going to call a method to do the calculations and to return to us the hours, minutes and seconds. I'm going to call this method get hours, minutes, seconds, and I'm now going to include here an out parameter called hours, an out parameter called minutes, mins, and minutes, and a ref parameter called seconds. Okay, so what we're going to do here, we're going to call this method, and the method is going to return to us through these parameters the hours, minutes and seconds. But the seconds must also be sent to the method. So that is why we have this as a ref parameter. So out and ref parameters mean that whatever changes are made to the parameters in the method, those changes will also be made here to these parameters or variables here. An out parameter need not be initialized when we call the method. So hours and minutes won't have values yet. Seconds must have a value because we're going to need this value of seconds to do the calculations in the method. Therefore, we declare it as a ref parameter. A ref parameter must be initialized before we can use it in a calling statement. So by doing this, we ensure that the method will work correctly, that it will receive a value for seconds. If we are using hours and minutes here in as parameters, we also need to declare them here as variables. Right. So the first method is get hours, minutes, seconds. It has two out parameters and a ref parameter, and it's going to receive the values for hours, minutes and seconds through these parameters. When it calls the method, it also sends it through the seconds value that the user has entered. Okay, so once this call is done, the hours, minutes and seconds will be stored in these variables. Now we can display them. So now we can say display hours, minutes, seconds, and we send it hours, minutes and seconds. So we're also going to write this method just now. These parameters are now the same values that we have there. In this case, they are not out or ref parameters. This is because we're just going to send them over to that method. They're going to be displayed and we don't want any values back. That is why we don't need to declare them as out or ref parameters. In this case, we want the method to return values for these variables, and therefore we declare them as out or ref parameters. Okay, so now I'm going to write these methods. So public, they're both going to be void methods. I'll explain that just now. And there we have out int hours. Out int minutes and ref int seconds. So we make it a void method because this method is not going to have a return statement through which it returns a single value. It is going to return 3 values, but those values will be returned through the parameters. Okay. So now we have to calculate the values for hours. Okay, so we received a value for seconds. So we can use that value to calculate the hours, and there are 3,600 seconds in an hour. Okay. Now we have to calculate the minutes. The minutes must be calculated from the seconds that remain after we have calculated the hours. And for that we use a statement that says seconds is equal to seconds mod 3600. Now you should remember from INF164 that this operator, the mod operator, calculates an integer value which is the remainder of that division. So seconds divided by 3600, whatever remains will be this. Okay, so we first calculate the hours, then we calculate the seconds that remain. Now I can say the minute is those seconds divided by 60, because a minute has 60 seconds. And then there might still be seconds remaining, so we do the same as before. We say now seconds is equal to seconds mod 60. Okay, so there we calculate the number of hours, then the remaining seconds. We use the remaining seconds to calculate the number of minutes, and then we use mod again to calculate the remaining seconds. Now these values of hours, seconds and minutes will now be carried back to the calling statement of the event handler when this method ends. Okay, so now we can write the display method. It will receive the hours, an integer minutes, and an integer seconds. Do it directly into the text box. So I'm going to say text seconds dot text is equal to, now I'm going to build up the string. I'm going to say convert to string h plus hours convert to string the minutes plus minutes and convert to string the S for the seconds and that is it. So this is, I'm sorry I forgot the type there, this is also a void method. Okay, so there are some things that we need to discuss here. So here, the parameters I named H, M and S. There I named them hours, minutes and seconds. It doesn't really matter. I could have used the names hours, minutes and seconds here as well, but I use the convention that if I'm passing parameters by value, I give them different names in the method header. If I pass the parameters by reference, in other words, if it's an out, out or ref, I use the same name as in the calling statement. And this is just to reflect that these variables and these parameters actually point to the same memory location. In this case, when we don't have an out or a ref parameter, it means a copy is made in memory of this parameter or variable. So to reflect this, I choose a different name. But as I say, it doesn't really matter. It will also work if you always use the same name or always use different names. Okay, so over here, we've now received the hours, minutes, and seconds. We convert each one to a string and we build up the output string. So I just want to run the program and make sure everything is fine. Okay, so if I say 10,000 seconds and I convert that to hours, I put it in the wrong place. Okay, so I put it in the text box instead of in the output string. So label output.text. Okay, if I run it, 1, 2, 3. Okay, I must just position my label slightly better on the form. Still not perfect. Okay, what I could do is it makes for quite a long output string, so I'm just gonna change this to minutes like that and sec like that. Okay, so let's just go through the program again. So when the user clicks on the convert button, it gets the seconds that the user entered from the text seconds text box, converts it to an integer and places it in the seconds variable. We also have variables for hours and minutes. We then call a method to calculate the hours, the minutes and the seconds given the seconds that the user provided. And those seconds will be passed to the method through this ref parameter. Okay, no values will be passed to the method through hours and minutes because they don't have values yet. And because they don't need to have values when we call, we make them out parameters. Seconds must have a value by the time we call the method, therefore we make it a ref parameter. Okay, so when this statement executes, control is passed over to this method. So it receives no value for hours, no value for minutes, but it receives a value for seconds, which is then going to use inside the method to calculate firstly the hours, then the remaining seconds, then the minutes, and finally we calculate the remaining seconds. These values, hours, minutes, and seconds, will now be carried back to the calling statement through those out and ref parameters, so that when the next statement is executed, those values that we got from the previous method call is now passed over to this method through these three parameters, and then in here we use those parameters to build up the output string. So in this case we don't have out or ref in front of here, because we're not going to make changes to those values that must be sent back to the calling statement. We just receive them and we provide the output.